chapter 23, section 2, an era of protest and challenge. And this particular section is about the women's rights movement. So basically, the first thing we have to talk about is feminism. Feminism is the theory of political, social, and economic equality for men and for women. And you guys probably know that after World War II, a lot of women left the workforce and they stayed home to raise families and build a home and all of those sorts of things. And there's nothing wrong with that. However, there were a lot of women who wanted to be seen, they wanted to be paid the same amount of men for the same job. They wanted to be seen as equals instead of as subordinates. They wanted political equality. And this is technically the second wave of feminism. The first wave would have been back when women were getting the right to vote, which they got the right to vote in 1919 with the 19th Amendment. Booyah! Okay, now one of the leading feminists at the time, her name was Betty Friedan. She wrote a book called The Feminine Mystique, and we've talked about this before. In this book, she questioned the limited roles of women in society. And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with being a homemaker. There's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of women, including Betty Friedan, they felt that women should be able to have the option, should they choose, to go out and become a lawyer, become a doctor, become, whatever it is that they wanted to do, to not be limited to, you can only stay home. Okay, and many women were the object to the house, or many women objected to the housewife stereotype. They wanted to be seen more as just someone who cooks and cleans and wipes babies' butts all day, which that's a very difficult job. I'm not downplaying that. Okay, but we are going to find that the number of women in the workforce, it actually did increase. There were more women working than there had been before, but a lot of times they were in jobs that didn't have opportunities for elevation, and they were limited. Like, you weren't going to see female rocket scientists or female surgeons and things like that. But one person that did rise to prominence was Sandra Day O'Connor. She was the first female Supreme Court justice, and after she got out of law school, she graduated towards the top of her class, and she found that she was not getting offers for jobs when there were men who graduated at the bottom of her class who were getting tons of offers just because they were men. So her rising all the way up to the Supreme Court, that's a big deal. Okay, now, one organization that we need to talk about is called NOW, N-O-W, and NOW stands for the National Organization for Women. And this organization was dedicated to winning itself true equality for all women. They wanted to attain a full and equal partnership of the sexes. And this galvanized the women's rights movement. And Betty Friedan, she was the one who pretty much organized this. She founded this organization. And like I said, they wanted true equality for women. And one of the big things that NOW focused on was protecting reproductive freedom for women. Okay, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But NOW really pushed for the Equal Rights Amendment, the ERA. It was a proposed amendment to the U.S. Constitution that would guarantee equal rights for women. It had been, they tried to pass this before back, when women were getting the right to vote, and it didn't work. So they're going to try and get it passed again. This would be an amendment to the Constitution. Like I said, it would guarantee gender equality. They were 3 states shy of having this ratified, and it didn't become a part of the U.S. Constitution. It is not currently one of our amendments. But like I said, NOW pushed to protect reproductive rights. They wanted women to have the right to an abortion. At this time in American history, abortions were illegal in most states, or they were limited in many states. And as a result, women who wanted to get abortions, they had to resort to very dangerous, risky procedures, something like, under the table type where you pay somebody cash and they cut a baby out of you, and I mean, it's just really iffy, and a lot of times ended with women getting infections or getting very sick because maybe the person who performed the procedure was not actually certified to do what they were doing, different things like that. And that's why they wanted women to have the right to these reproductive rights. Radical feminists, there were some women who thought now was too tame. They said that the women's rights movement needed to go even further, that, you know, women needed, I don't know, they wanted to show how society trapped women. I don't know if I'd say go that far that women are trapped. I don't know, you might disagree with me. But they wanted to show how society trapped women. Gloria Steinem was one of these, and she'll be on your worksheet. She used the mass media to raise awareness about women's rights and the need for the feminist movement. She eventually becomes the co-founder of Miss Magazine, and the reason she did that, she actually went undercover into this club where that was owned by Playboy, and you know, everybody at the time thought that, oh, if you're a Playboy bunny, you have this glamorous life, everybody adores you. But she really showed how these Playboy bunnies were objectified and humiliated in order to make a living, and she wrote about that. And so she was one of these who was even more radical than now. But there were people who opposed the feminist movement, and some of them were women. Phyllis Schlafly, for example, she said that feminism would be the downfall of family and marriage. And she had 6 children, but she had a law degree. She had a master's in political science. And even though she raised her kids and stayed at home, she wrote articles and did lots of things like that. But she said that if women and men were guaranteed total political, social, and economic equality, that it would cause the breakdown of families. And she said that it portrayed women as victims, and she said women are not victims. Okay, so she fought the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, and it did in fact fail. Now, lasting effects of this women's rights movement, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which we've spoken about before, part of it was Title VII, which outlaws discrimination based on sex. As far as this legislation, we've only talked about banning discrimination based on race, but it also banned discrimination based on sex. This will be on your worksheet. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they created the that's going to be later. We'll get to that. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, it enforced federal prohibition of job discrimination. So people can't say, well, I'm not going to hire you because you're a woman. And like if I were to go on a job interview, it's illegal for them to ask me if I'm pregnant and then refuse to hire me because I'm pregnant, and then I'll have to take leave in X number of months. Okay. In 1961, we discussed this already in previous chapters. President Kennedy established the Commission on the Status of Women to examine workplace discrimination, specifically women not being paid the same as men for doing the same job. And so there were channels and ways to go through to try and end those discrepancies. In 1972, we have Title IX of higher education, and this plays a big role in colleges, universities, even high schools today. It banned discrimination in education. So before, like my dad told me when he was growing up at his high school, they only had men's sports. You know, girls could play sports, but they were just like recreational. They didn't actually play for the school. They had to go to like the YMCA or something like that. They didn't have those things at one point where he lived. And so today that's illegal. Your high school has to offer the same number of girls' sports as they do boys' sports. And in colleges, you might see that, you know, like Oklahoma State, they have women's soccer, but they don't have men's soccer. And that's because they have to have the same number of female sports as they do male sports. And because men have wrestling and football, you have to have more women's sports to even that out. Okay. And this is what I was talking about earlier. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, it's going to make it illegal to deny credit to someone because of their gender. You can't say, well, I'm not going to give you a loan because you're a woman. That's illegal. You can refuse to give me a loan because I have bad credit, but because I'm a woman, heck no. Okay? And then, of course, we have the super controversial Roe v. Wade. Okay? 1973. This is what protected a woman's right to have an abortion. And it was super controversial then, and it's very controversial now. But it did give women the legal right to have an abortion. And I encourage you guys, go look up Roe v. Wade. It's interesting to read how it got passed, and the backstory of the woman who argued for the right to an abortion. Actually, by the time that Roe versus Wade got approved, she had already had her child, so she couldn't have an abortion. But if you go through and read some of that, it's kind of interesting. And, had we been in class, we might have been able to debate it a little bit and talk about it more. Okay, but we're going to see workplace changes. More women are going to be working. From 1950 to 2000, the number of women in the workforce is going to double. That's on your worksheet. The number of women in the workforce is going to double. And some people say that women are still limited in the occupations that they can have, and this kind of plays into what's called the pink collar ghetto. It refers to a wage disparity between men and women, the fact that women today still get paid less than men do. Some people argue that that's because women are still responsible for raising children more so than men were, and so they have to be more flexible in what kind of jobs they can have. I probably could not go and be an FBI agent and be gone all the time doing undercover operations and things like that when I have 3 children at home. Okay, so there's only certain occupations that I'm able to have. And this pink collar ghetto idea, it basically means that the majority of people who are poor in the United States, or I wouldn't say the majority, but there's a growing number of them who are single women, and it's because they work in the lowest paid jobs and they're having to take care of their children all at the same time. And that's the feminization of poverty. All right.